Hello everyone, my name is Mike and we're continuing Sabaton week with No Bullets Fly. Hope you enjoy.
What do you owe Franz Stigler?
My life.
That's pretty simple.
Sure is.
Yeah, so we're continuing Sabaton week, as I said, with No Bullets Fly. And given the thumbnail and the title, I believe this is one that I've been recommended a number of times, and this is a story that I actually quite know because I've read the book about it, and this is the story of Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler. Now, I don't want to go into too much information as well, particularly because this says it's a animated story video, so I don't know if it's going to provide the background as well, but it's a real heartwarming kind of story, if you're not unfamiliar, about kind of the humanity in war, in which, you know, there's so little of it. I don't want to talk too much because obviously the video may well cover it, but I will do, as I always do, the link will be in the description below, and I'll fill in the gaps where I can. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it.
It's December the 20th, 1943, and in the freezing air, high above Germany, 2nd Lieutenant Charles "Charlie" Brown is at the controls of his B-17F, ye old pub. At 11:30, approaching the target of the Focke-Wulf plant near Bremen, the pub is rocked as 4 explosions go off right in front of the B-17. A cry comes across the intercom. "We're hit!" In the plexiglass nose, a huge hole had been made, and icy cold wind was being blown inside, making freezing conditions for the crew. Engine 2 had been hit, and co-pilot Spencer "Pinky" Luke let out an expletive as he noticed a huge hole in the right wing. Releasing their bombs over the factory, the crew turned to the north, planning to head over the coast, then turn west for home. With one engine out, and engine 4 now faulty, the pub started to fall back from the formation with another damaged plane. Sam "Blackie" Blackford in the bull turret watched as it disappeared into a cloud bank. There was an orange flash in the cloud. "Bandits!" Eckie shouted as 5 BF-109s streaked from the cloud bank. Then another cry. "Bandits!" as 8 FW-190s were spotted in formation ahead of the pub. Sergeant Bertram "Frenchy" Coulomb in the turret shot the 190 out of the sky. The navigator, Al "Doc" Sadek, took out the second. Pinky reported that engine 3 had been hit. That left just one engine at full power. The BF-109s attacked the pub from behind, swarming all over. But due to the cold wind running through the pub, most of the guns were frozen. In a turn now, the pub was repeatedly hit, taking extreme damage and killing the tail gunner. A shell penetrated and exploded near the waist gunners, injuring the crew and creating a huge hole. The oxygen supply was taken out, and the pub spun towards the ground. With the crew unconscious due to lack of oxygen, the B-17 fell for 4 miles. Charlie started to come around and grabbed the controls, pulling back as the plane continued to fall. 5,000 feet, 4,000 feet, 3,000 feet. Just moments from hitting the earth, the plane pulled up, almost scraping the trees as it did.
Okay, so just before then, I just want to make a remark as well about this, because I thought I'd have a look at the title just before this video, just in the case, and it's called A Higher Call, and I strongly recommend it. Although it's been a few years since I've read it, it's a really good story telling this kind of event, and I will also, if I can remember as well, because as well as reading the book, I also stumbled upon a documentary some years ago, or some interviews, where you had Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler, who, when they met up, and you know, their interactions with each other, and also in interviews where they spoke to them individually. One particular point as well that I really want to include, and I will include it if I can remember and find the documentary where it is at some stage the entire crew who survived had a scrapbook made up of all their descendants, so their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and they presented that to Franz Stigler years after the war, showing them that because of his mercy, this is how many lives that he was able to kind of bring into being, so to speak. It's really emotional, and if I can find the right time and I can actually find the documentary, I'll try and insert some clips in here and there where I can do it. But other than that, yeah, what the video said, essentially bang on the money. B-17s flying over Bremen and carrying out bombing raids, and that's when the old pub, Charlie Brown's fighter, I think he was a second lieutenant or lieutenant to Americans out there, got torn up by flak. It lags behind, and that's when it was being strafed. Just for those of you who aren't familiar with kind of plane identification and stuff like that, when it said BF-109s, there's what's known as Messerschmitts, and the FW-190s are Focke-Wulfs, both German fighter planes essentially. But that's all you really need to know about them. And yeah, and as they're being strafed and stuff like this, they got strafed for quite some time, and as they said, a number of the crew are killed or wounded or just straight up unconscious, and the plane's really struggling, and that's when Franz Stigler makes his appearance. But I suppose we're about to hit the song now, so we'll see what the song says. So I hate to do that just before it's about to hit. But yeah, so as the video shows, essentially, that's kind of what happened. Franz Stigler actually, when he spotted Charlie Brown's aircraft, was on the floor rearming and refueling. And when he spotted it, he immediately climbed in his fighter and pursued. And as he's coming up alongside it, the extent of the flak damage you could actually see directly into the hull, directly inside the cabin. And that's where, by his own words, he was going to fire, but then when he saw the people, the crew, some injured, some dead, those that were alive, terrified, he couldn't bring himself to fire upon it. And I remember distinctly as well in the interview that I was talking about earlier, and this is where, if I can find a clip, I will put it in, but essentially he said that when he was in the air, when he was doing his job as a pilot, he didn't think of the planes that he was shooting down as people.
And I saw him lying in there, bleeding profusely, so I couldn't shoot.
You couldn't?
No. If I wouldn't have seen him, it was different. If I wouldn't have seen a person at all, I would have shot.
They're the enemy.
When you shoot at airplane, you don't think of people in there. You see the airplane, nothing else. The plane, that bombs your cities or your factories or whatever. But in this case, as I saw this tail gunner, it's just couldn't do it.
I wonder how many people wouldn't have done that. Would have still pulled the trigger regardless. And essentially a helpless opponent. How many people in that situation, regardless of what nationality they were, whether they were German or whether they were Allied. I think the harsh reality is most people wouldn't have done that. And as it's stated there as well, he risked his life 2 times, and that is because one, he risked his life just flying near the B-17. I mean, if the old pub had armament still operational, there's no doubt they would have fired upon him. But secondly, as well, is he actually flew alongside the B-17 to shield it from German flak. And I don't mean physically shielded, but I mean he flew alongside it so the German flak wouldn't fire, having seen them alongside there. And it's important as well to remember that this could have been absolutely massive, because not only could have been killed by the B-17, Charlie Brown's crew, not only could he have been killed by his own side's flak, but had anybody actually properly reported him for this, it would have been a court-martial, possibly a decent chance of execution for doing this. And as the song suggests, I think they said a salute, and then or a gesture or something like that, and then he made his way. And that is because Franz Stigler tried to convince Charlie Brown's crew a couple of times to where to land. Essentially, first time, I think, if I remember correctly, they tried a gesture that Charlie Brown just sets the B-17 down inside of Germany and surrenders themselves as POWs. The second time, I believe he tried to point them towards neutral Sweden so they could set down, and so still be okay, but not obviously get back immediately into the fight. And then eventually he covered them over open water towards the Channel, towards Britain. And that's where, once he was kind of certain that the B-17 was going to make it, he saluted or waved, I can't remember which, and made his way back. And yeah, it's a remarkable story, and we'll see where the rest of this song takes us, because they're still halfway through.
The story was kept secret until 1986, when Brown started the search for the German pilot who had shown mercy on that December day all those years ago. In 1990, Brown received a letter from a man named Stigler, who was living in Canada. Stigler explained that he had been the pilot of the German fighter who had escorted Ye Olde Pub. This video is of their first meeting.
Franz, what were your feelings when you met again for the first time?
I was so happy as we met that I tracked him, hugged him. Was it easy?
The fact that he risked his life really in many ways, and I wrote him in a letter, I said, if you made a habit of feeling sorry for bomber crews, flag up alongside them, I am sure that you were shot down many times. But it was not only the audacity that he came up to us, and then recognizing the threat. If someone had seen him and reported it, it could have been a death sentence.
Franz gifted Charlie a book, and inside the inscription read, "In 1940, I lost my only brother as a night fighter. On the 20th of December, 4 days before Christmas, I had the chance to save a B-17 from her destruction. A plane so badly damaged, it was a wonder that she was still flying. The pilot, Charlie Brown, is for me as precious as my brother was. Thanks, Charlie. Your brother Franz." In 2008, within a few months of each other, the two firm friends went on their final journey. Franz Stigler never got the Knight's Cross, but as he always said, he got something better.
Stigler. I would like to thank Sabaton and your song, No Bullets Fly. Because of this, the story of my father will live on. See you on your next concert tour. Safe journey, gentlemen, and again, thank you.
That end is beautiful. Yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit lost for words at the ending part there. It's just so the story was kept secret because the important thing to remember is Stigler, of course, wasn't going to tell anybody once he landed, partly because it would mean that he would either get a court-martial or be shot for it. But Charlie Brown was also, and his entire crew was told not to speak about it to anybody else because the American Air Force essentially didn't want bomber crews having positive ideas or feelings towards German pilots. And so Charlie Brown and his crew were essentially sworn to secrecy for a long time, particularly in the the short term during the war, because they couldn't have thinking the enemy as human beings. Just as Stigler said, he didn't think of the planes as people. The exact same thing happens the other way. How war works, generally speaking, is dehumanizing who you're fighting. And yeah, so that little interview where they was able to meet for the first time, that was one of the ones I was talking about, but there was also some other interviews as well that I am going to intersperse if I can find them. I'm going to try and hunt them down and search for those little things and intersperse them here and there where I can. Because I think it's important to talk about and to talk about these things. And I think really as well, the important thing about No Bullets Fly here is it's a story of humanity, it's a story of people, because it's something that I think, again, I've said a couple of times on this channel, but when we're talking about wars and we're talking about these stories and things like this, everyone who's ever fought in a war is a person. I know that sounds really stupid to say, but they're not numbers, they're not these mythical beings that are so disconnected from us. They're people. They have hopes, dreams, ambitions, things that they want to do. And there's no real different from us. They're just in that situation.
The fact that Franz shot down colleagues, friends,
That was his job.
family, that doesn't bother you?
No, that was his job. That day, I killed a man who had 70 victories in the Soviet Union. He had a pregnant wife that arrived on the base while he's airborne that day. These things you put in the back and you lock.
And I said I I got a little bit emotional when you saw Charlie Brown and Stigler talking to each other then. But I said I have no shame in admitting the first time that I heard about this story that it did really kind of get me quite choked up, because personally speaking as well, my grandfather was in Bomber Command, and he was the tail gunner that flew in Lancasters over in the Western Theatre against the Germans, and I can only think of the amount of times that he nearly didn't come home, and whether somebody might have spared him if he was in that situation. Yeah, and he served there until he transferred into different squadrons, and then he transferred to the Pacific, where he was involved in taking the fight to the Japanese. But yeah, so I suppose as well, with a bomber being involved as well, it kind of drives home a little bit extra as well, I suppose, beyond just the sheer showing of humanity that happened in this event. And yeah, as they said, in 2008, within months of each other, they both went on the final flight, where, you know, as I said, hopefully they're flying around up there together. But yeah, as I said, if I can find the documentary, particularly as well, where they show Franz Stigler, all the descendants of the bomber crew that he spared.
30,000 Americans died in B-17s during World War II. From Charlie Brown's plane, at least 3 men survived, and they have 25 descendants.
Kimberly Ansberger, Michael Ansberger, Michelle Warner.
Franz Stigler had never seen their pictures or heard their names.
Jessica Blackford, Zachary Blackford, Richard Papalo, Scott Pickard.
25 people who came into being and live today, all because Franz Stigler did not pull the trigger.
Nicholas Blackford. No, it's the other side of fate, which we have no control about.
This has been a really good video. I think song-wise, probably not my favourite musical-wise of the song, but I mean, the story is great. I love the animated kind of story around it as well, which filled in, kind of done my job for me, I suppose. And particularly that ending with Stigler's daughter. I mean, that's just a beautiful way to end the video. And so yeah, I hope you've enjoyed. Hopefully you've learned a little bit of something here. And otherwise, I hope to see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye. Stay safe.